Hey guys, Metal Jesus here, and today I'm very excited to talk about the latest release from Night Dive Studios. Outlaws. Yes, the only Wild West shooter where it feels like every gunfight should be followed by like a harmonica solo and maybe a tumbleweed rolling through your game room. This is a pretty cool release. This is their remaster of Outlaws that was released back in 1997. I remember when this came out, and it was almost like LucasArts was saying, okay, we're going to take the Star Wars Dark Forces engine, put it in the Wild West, and add this kind of like a Clint Eastwood movie MIDI soundtrack. I don't think it sold very well, but for people who played it at the time, it was very memorable. And, you know, for years, the original game actually was pretty tough to get running on modern hardware because it was so tied to Windows 95. And as you can imagine, the drivers in your new computer, you know, they're never going to be that backwards compatible with something this old. Now, eventually, GOG.com released a version of it that finally would run on modern Windows, but it's that original game running at that lower resolution. And, you know, while it's really cool to be able to play that version of it now, as you can see right here, side by side, the remaster is so much more pleasing to your eyes. So for instance, all the footage that you're going to see in this game is running on my Windows 11 machine, running at 4K and 60 frames a second. And as you're going to see in this video, they're using the uncompressed cutscenes as well as updated visuals for the weapons, the characters, the enemies, you know, all fully recreated from the original assets. But if you do prefer the old look, you can always go back to that, so nothing here is lost. So what's going on here? Well, in this game you play as an ex-lawman, James Anderson, a guy whose idea of grief counseling is basically loading up a six-shooter and taking out an army of bandits who killed your wife and kidnapped your daughter, all because you wouldn't sell your farm to the local bad guy. Is this the most original story for a game? No, it's really not, but that's not the point. I mean, this is a mid-90s first-person shooter set in the American Wild West, and I think it captures that perfectly. The first thing you're going to notice is that the cutscenes are gorgeously animated in that kind of spaghetti western style, and they're long cutscenes too. I mean, you can tell that time and effort was put into making the western story move the gameplay and the levels along. And so you're going to be getting a cutscene both at the beginning of a level, which sets it up, and then also at the end whenever you take out the boss. And it's always really satisfying because they often beg for their lives. Oh yeah.
Marshal James Anderson, once a lawman, always a lawman. Boys, did I tell you how much I hate lawmen?
This is probably obvious, but this is an old game, and the first-person shooting by today's standard is pretty simple, pretty basic. Young whippersnappers today would probably describe this as a boomer shooter. I'm doing that in quotes. You know, it's a term that not everybody is crazy about. I personally don't mind it. It sets the expectation going into, you know, what the focus is going to be in a game like this, which is basically fast shooting and almost no fat included, which, again, I can appreciate because I grew up with these. And also, too, I do think that there is a younger generation that's also starting to realize that boomer shooters are fun. One of the cool innovations of this game, it was kind of a big deal at the time, is that Outlaws was one of the first FPS games to include precision shooting, basically featuring a zoomable, you know, rifle where you could snipe things. And, you know, back in 1997, this was pretty seriously cool stuff. Now, obviously today it's not that big of a deal, but that's why a lot of people look fondly back on this game because you could snipe, and yeah, it still works really well. And speaking of weapons, you've got a bunch of them that you're going to find and pick up, including a 45 revolver, a scoped 44 rifle, a 10-gauge shotgun, a good old sawed-off 12-gauge shotgun, plus you're going to be picking up a knife, and you can always resort to your fists if you run out of precious ammo. Going back and replaying this game for this review has been kind of interesting because there are some things to consider if you haven't played an old FPS game like this recently. And the first thing is there is very little hand-holding in these games. You do have a map, which is incredibly important because these levels can definitely feel maze-like, and without a lot of detail that you would get in a modern game, it can be kind of easy to get lost or not necessarily know where to go next. So thankfully, the map fills in as you explore, so you always know where you've been and where you need to go. And like so many other first-person shooter games at the time, many of the levels in this game, you're kind of looking for keys to unlock new areas or maybe hit a switch to open a door. But also sometimes, like in level 2, well, you just need to take out a certain number of enemies before the boss will appear and then move the story along. In the train level, you just need to keep pushing forward until you eventually run into this locked door that can only be pried open with a crowbar that I happened to miss accidentally way back at the beginning of the level. It's actually pretty funny, but thankfully the enemies don't respawn. But it can be easy to miss a key or a button you need to push, or in this case, something I need to pick up off the ground. And again, I actually find this type of game design to be refreshing because it doesn't hold your hand as much as a modern shooter might. But it can lead to some frustration as sometimes you just don't know what to do next. The other thing I would recommend is that you take a look at the button or keyboard mapping when you start up the game. For instance, there's a lantern that you carry with you and you can turn it on if the corridor is too dark or if you're in a cavern that's too dark. And you wouldn't necessarily know that unless you looked at the options or you actually happen to have the original manual. And no review of this game would be complete without mentioning the soundtrack. The soundtrack sounds like it was ripped right off a VHS copy of like The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. It is seriously quality stuff. Actually, so much so that I would love to get a vinyl record release of this soundtrack because I would play it all the time. It's truly excellent. Another thing that Night Dive Studio added into this was the vault. So this is where you can dive into the details of the game's development. And it's pretty extensive in here. Almost everything that went into the making of this game is documented in here, including the original storyboard designs for the many cutscenes. They break down the soundtrack so you can listen to the different songs that are included in the game. Like I said, those are all excellent. They also get into the tools of the trade, which shows how they used programs like AutoCAD and Lightwave and other tools to actually make this game. They also show you individual graphic renders of the animations for the different weapons in the game. So you get to see how the guns worked, how the reloading worked, how they animated all that and stitched it together. And I'm just hitting the tip of the iceberg of the vault. So if you are an uber fan of this game, this stuff is going to be gold. And it's cool because I like how releases like this are more than just making the game work better on modern hardware and, look better, which is a given, right? But they're actually including archival stuff in here of the entire development of it, which I think is really important. I also want to mention that there is some multiplayer in here, including Deathmatch, Team Play, Capture the Flag, Kill the Fool with the Chicken. I thought that was pretty funny, although I didn't get to try it myself. So when this actually launches, that'll probably be a little bit easier for me to do. But as you can see, there is a ton of content here, and this is really for, I think, anybody who either enjoyed and loved the original version of this game, or maybe you're just starting to get into some of these older boomer shooters and you kind of want to check this one out. I like it because, again, it is set in the Wild West. It's something that you didn't see a lot back then. You don't even see it a lot today, especially as a first-person shooter. And so there's a lot to like here. I love what Night Dive Studio does. And yeah, this was a lot of fun putting this together. And so if you want to check out the game, I'll put a link down in the video description below. And as always, guys, I want to thank you for watching my channel. Thank you for subscribing, and take care.
It's gonna take
take more than bullets to get what you want, mister.